Welcome, everybody, to KC Happy Hour number 89. We just wrapped up the first of our 8 races we've got in a row here on Card Chaser last week with Texas Sprint Racing Series. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day. We have a good bit we'll get into here tonight. We got my new full-time co-host, Braden Eves, in the studio.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for having me on, Xander.
Yup. And joining us, Texas Sprint Racing Series Round 2 Spring Roundup winner, Alex Stanfield. Chuck, good to see you.
What's going on, guys?
So, lots of racing over the course of Memorial Day weekend. We'll get into a lot of karting that we had over the weekend. There was obviously us over in Texas. The Sunshine State Karting Challenge was pretty big over in Florida. 146 there, 154 with us, which this will probably be one of, if not one of the two smaller on the TSRS turnouts, which has been pretty good the last few years. But the biggest race of Memorial Day weekend, hardly arguably, is the Indy 500. It felt like for us with the night race there, everybody was hoping that while the red flags made the race entertaining, that they would get done before our racing started. There were TVs all around the pit. So, Alex, I know you were watching it in and out of your sessions. First, kind of your overall thoughts on the 500.
Yeah, we were all pretty glued to the race. I just wanted the red flags to end, and unfortunately, I didn't get to see the last 10 laps because I had to go to warm up. But I came back and rewatched it, and yeah, I saw that Joseph won the race, and was pretty happy. I wish O'Ward got it, but he crashed out with 10 to go, I believe. But it was still a good race. I don't know, what was going on at the end with the restarts, but it was still a good race, and I'm glad everyone was safe with that tire flying in the air.
Braden?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting race. I was trying to watch as much as I could between helping everyone out at the track. But, first 150 laps are pretty standard. At the end, a bunch of reds. Didn't really quite get to watch it all through. But, good to see Joseph win. He definitely deserves a 500 for sure. And, I think all of us would have liked to see some more green flag running in the end, but at the end of the day, is what it is, and we have a new Indy 500 champion.
Yeah, it's the Twitter pops off on either way they go each year. This year, last year with red flags late in the race to kind of get a green flag finish. This one was even more, I wouldn't want to say Mickey Mouse, but a lot harder to pull off with going straight out of the pits for the last lap and a lot of reds at the end. But I mean, Joseph got the lead off the last restart, which, with 9 laps to go, I feel like even if they went yellow there and we just had one restart and they would have wrecked again and it ends under yellow or it goes green to the finish, he probably would have had it. So, if you take out, I think the middle restart, and the last restart, Joseph deserves to win. So the right guy won. But I don't know if it's a new age fan thing in me or what. I respect that there's the 107 years that it's been running. I don't think it's a bad thing that they're doing what they can to get it to finish under green. To me, when we were talking about it, I thought that the biggest thing that was blundered, and I don't know if this was just Pato on the two restarts he had, or Pato, and then I guess Newgarden, but the restarts were just, I think, way too late. I think the pack got packed up way too tight. And I think that if that first restart, they don't have Pato going so slow and he guns it in the middle of 3 and 4 like a typical IndyCar start, the field's going to get spread out, and it's going to be fine. And maybe I was thinking about it a lot that like maybe he was just trying to go slower so that way they were still building speed by the time they got to turn 1, because with the way the aero package was, they could only pass if they were the first 2 cars in line. And if you were the first place guy, you were a sitting duck. So you were trying not to get jumped the way Ericsson did, or the way even Joseph and Pato did on their restarts. But by going so slow, it packed it up. So that's the only thing I think that it should be the real takeaway, not so much that they did the reds, because every red I feel like they kind of had to do, especially the last one was just weird. Like, what are you going to do? You can't stop them on the front straight away. From going, or let them go by. All the safety people were there, so you got to red it. And then what do you do to the fans? Do you just go out and parade around for 2 laps? With a guy that got the restart lead in the only, like, that to me was the most Mickey Mouse thing. I don't know what you thought, Braden, as a guy who's run the series so much, but like, getting the lead off a restart when they wreck coming to the green. I don't know how you count 200 feet worth of green when the leader doesn't even get to the line.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just one of those situations, right? Where I've been in it as well, where you'll be in the lead at a track where and they give guidelines to the drivers, here's where you're allowed to go. This is the recommended speed. And if you're coming to a green on a yellow like that, you want to keep it as slow as you possibly can, because the slower you're going, the bigger that initial jump is that you get. If you're perfect in the rev range and say, for example, second, third gear, the jump that the leader gets sort of makes it a little bit more fair. So when you're in the lead, you want to keep it slow so you can get that jump, because whoever's in the lead has such a big disadvantage. They want to sort of get a little bit of jump. It's not going to it's going to help them that much, but at the end of the day, it will help out the leader and make it not quite so easy for second place to blow by, especially in a one lap shootout sort of scenario where everyone is just getting more and more aggressive, and they all know there's, yellows breed yellows, and they really they have very limited time. I think that's a lot of the reason why Pato was so aggressive, 8 laps to go, is because if you wait and you don't get that pass, a yellow can come out and it can just keep going red, and then it's just over.
Right. He's probably just as much replaying last year where, he went and he would have maybe had a shot coming out of 4 if that thing stayed green. He had given up too much momentum in 1 and 2, when he missed the pass on Ericsson in 22. But then the yellow came out, before the race was over. So he didn't get a shot at it anyway. And then that happened again to him again this year at Texas. Right. So that stuff develops over time where your mindset changes. And I feel like I don't even think of that till now, but that dude lapped up to second at Texas Motor Speedway and then loses off of, a yellow coming out and ending the race early when he was setting up for the last second pass, which by not having overtime, and which is a whole other debate that all the IndyCar purists hate, you run that risk, right?
It's just it's just to use a karting reference. Our Indy 500 in karting is Supernats, and you get to the end of the race. Nobody cares about second place, so everyone's just going to be laying it all out there, do or die. They don't care about crashing out as much as they would anywhere else, because as much as it is a points race, just like any other race, and it's actually double points, all they care about is the win. And Pato's, I think he got second twice now in a row, the previous 2. So
the
he's
previous
he's
2
in,
ovals at least.
yeah, well, I
21
think he got second at the 500 2 years ago as well, and I know he got second last year. So I think he's coming off of 2 second places in a row, another second place in Texas, and he's like, man, I don't want to do this again. I want to come out on top. So he just goes full aggressive, and unfortunately, didn't quite make the right decision there in the end.
Alex, half the reason I wanted to bring you on is, whenever races at the top, NASCAR, IndyCar, F1 get to be where the drivers are wrecking too much, karting gets the finger pointed at it almost instantly. And granted, every single guy in the Indy 500 race go-karts on their way up. 90% of the USF Pro field, Pro Championships fields from juniors to 2000 to Pro 1000 raced all the way up. So as someone that's in the game right now, right at, I would say probably about your peak or coming up on your peak in a younger generation, how much are you thinking about like points in any given kart race with how many different championships there are?
Yeah, I don't really think about points when I race. Of course, you want to win the championship, but to win championships, you got to win the race. So I think it's just you think about winning every race, trying to make every pass you can. I think when it comes down to the last race, you might start thinking about the championship a little bit, but at the end of the day, winning the race gets you the championship, and that's all that really matters.
And Tony Stewart talks about this a lot. I think a lot of the older drivers start to realize it, that, the driver code of ethics on track, changes by generation a little bit. Did you see Pato's incident with Dixon over at Long Beach as well?
I did, yeah.
So between that and between the incident with Ericsson, what do you think is occurring, guy?
It just seems like it was a little late. It was late on Ericsson with the one in Long Beach. It was hard to say. I think it was more of a racing incident in Long Beach. It was a little aggressive, I think you could put it both ways. It was aggressive, but I could see his point of view too a little bit on the pass.
Braden, what do you think on those 2 deals, especially the most recent one?
I think it just comes down to the new age of racing, right? Where people are coming up, and especially in like the junior formulas or when they're when they're learning, and aggression is just preached so much, but there's a limit to it, because as soon as you overdo the aggression, you're crashing out of races, and then now you're not a championship driver, you're just somebody who's always going for the race win. And anybody sort of that has that mentality is just going to end up putting themselves in bad situations all the time. And like even in Road to Indy, where like I've raced in Road to Indy for several years, and there's no push to pass, and certain tracks are so difficult to pass, you're just going to get more and more and more aggressive and send it in as sort of a do or die move, because you also know that they will have to back out in most situations. Even if I'm not even really talking about like end of race battles, but like in Road to Indy, you might be on like lap 5 and not be able to move, so then you have to send it in and basically say, if you turn in, we're both in the wall. And it all just kind of depends on how easy it is to pass. Like the 500, it's difficult to pass, but the people that have pace are still able to do it. And it just kind of comes down to all the drivers knowing how difficult it is to pass, and then adjusting their aggression level to make up for it, so that they know that they can still make positions up in the race.
Do you think it factors in at all that, like, racing against the same guys the next week, of giving more respect to them, because you don't want a guy to kind of run you rougher the next week? Whereas, Braden, I remember you and I have talked about this a lot at length, that, like, years ago, uh, guys were staying in each ladder series longer because there weren't as many. People would stay in lights or in Atlantics for a long time, and then go to IndyCar. That people would stay in, you wouldn't see kids coming out of junior, skip senior into karts or out of karts. And even then in junior, it's a year and a half. You're one good year and then you're gone. If you do anywhere good in junior, you're told to move up at 13. So you're never racing the same guys twice, it feels like. I mean, unless the off chance you're synced up going up the ladder. Does that factor in at all, of like the level that you'd bonsai someone if you care about running with them next week?
I think it for sure does. For sure. I mean, when you're racing against the same people all the time, if there's say 4 or 5 people at national races that are always sort of up front, you're not going to just completely take them out, because it's going to come back to you. So it's a respect thing. And sometimes there are mistakes that are made, but I think the drivers that are the most respectful and end up just having the cleanest racing. And I don't even really think it comes down to being like too nice, because there's plenty of drivers that are very, very aggressive and good in last lap battles and good racecraft, but they don't crash out all the time.
Alex, what do you think? Does it matter at all that, you get to run with the same guys versus not?
Yeah, for sure. I think it does. I mean, like what Braden said, you're gonna be with the same guy next weekend usually, like especially in the car racing. And maybe not as much in like the lower ranks in karting, like the TSRS, if you're a national guy. But I think it does matter because you're gonna be racing the same guy, and they will come back for you if you wreck them. So I think it does matter for sure.
Now, in our sport, going back to like the finishes, um, we treat it almost like rain is treated in car racing, where if we're usually past halfway, that race is supposed to not get restarted. If we're under halfway, we restart it. But looking at like, marquee races, whether it's Miami Grands, Rock Vegas, or Supernats, Alex, to you, and then to Braden, if it were to come down where we've run 14 laps and we're going to be at a 2-lap, 3-lap shootout, are you for it for a show? Or are you against it? What do you think?
I'm usually for it. I've seen in the past, like I think it was 2 or 3 years ago in Supernats in KZ, and Krimmers had a big lead over Formal, and they got red flagged, and they had it was like a 3-lap shootout for the end, or it was like a 5-lap shootout, and Formal got him, which closed up the battle, which I think was fun to watch. But like racing wise, I think it's fun as well, for both having those shootouts at the end. I think it just creates better racing and just mixes up the race a little bit more.
Yeah, and it
Braden?
comes down to consistency a lot too, because like we're talking about this, and actually it brings up in my mind like the 2021 Formula One World Championship that came down to the last race. And obviously, if you're going to talk to Lewis Hamilton, he's going to tell you that it's stupid that they restarted it and that it should have just ended right there. But all of us want a race, and I think all of us can agree, especially in hindsight, that that was one of the probably the best. I mean, maybe it's because I'm younger, but probably the best world championship that's ever happened in Formula One, and it came down from competitive racing all year long, and you want it to come down to the last lap and the last race. That's why everyone is a racing fan now in the United States, is because of the incredible product that Formula One put out when it was actually equal cars, and it was two of the best drivers in the world going at each other the whole year.
Yeah, like we were talking about this little pre-show, Alex. You know, I mean, 40, 50 years ago, it was a spectacle to see a car go 500 miles. So, you know, that's what you were there for. You know, and it's still a spectacle at Indy, and it's still dangerous to see them go 240. But I think when people get mad about restarts or doing stuff to try and make the racing better at the expense of the purism of the sport, is like, it's a mantra that just gets forgotten into the past. Every single sport has like done drastic changes. You know, it's not just NASCAR. The NBA just recently took out their wild card for the playoffs and, you know, did the play-in tournament, and, you know, college football added playoffs in, and you know, I'm sure, I don't follow soccer enough. I'm sure there's changes there. The NHL is constantly looking at doing different stuff with their playoffs. NASCAR changes their playoffs. So, you know, to a degree, like, we need to remember why we get to do what we get to do in any way. And it's to put on a show at all those levels. And the Supernats the same way. The Supernats, not everyone, you know, most people racing there don't get paid. You're spending money to race there, sure, but you know, if you want to run KZ and run for $10,000 or run for $10,000 in X30, you got to earn that $10,000. And that comes down to, you know, making it entertaining. And it's not entertaining to just watch us turn laps, and it's not entertaining to watch someone walk away. Sports have always been a spectacle. I think they always will be. And people that say that sport is like, you know, you ruin the integrity is, you know, silly, because sports are silly. You know, we drive around in circles, right? So we can't get too caught up in that. But, you know, the F1 thing was like, the only thing that made it weird really was the, you know, the lap car whole deal. I agree with Braden. Like, the consistency is one thing, but you gotta, you know, that's the argument that everyone has with the 500, because it's been doing it for 107 years. Now, at least there's differences throughout, and there's been differences all the way through, but stuff changes. So, you know, if you at least get ahead of it, then you're fine. I think, you know, you can get away with consistency if you make a rule change and people complain, but it goes on. But I'm all for the restarts too. You know, I think at the right kart races, if it's late like that, only probably those three I named. You know, maybe like CK&A Grands, because that's the 4-cycle crown jewel. I don't want to see a club race.
I mean, there's pretty rarely
Yeah.
a red flag, honestly, and especially in those races. I mean, if any crashes are going to happen in those races, typically it's the last lap, and, you know, we don't have cautions in karting or anything, so you're just kind of out of the race at that point. But, you know, I mean, so if it did happen where there was a big crash, you know, 2 or 3 laps to go, and like Supernats, for sure you would need to restart it, stop it, and give everyone a warm-up lap and restart it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, anything more to add on to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think same thing with like the IME Grands as well. We haven't really had a red flag there, but I've seen usually in the past, with the last 2 years, the leaders have gotten away there quite a bit. So, you know, if it does happen, I think because it's mainly just GoPro as well, you get mostly pack racing there. So if a red flag does happen, it would be, you know, I think good for the racing at the end, and like Supernats as well, because I think at the end of the day, we want to see good racing everywhere. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of good racing, we'll get into the TSRS weekend a little bit better after this break. So stick with us, guys. We'll be right back.
Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including IAME and ROC divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amr Sonata at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com.
Welcome back, guys. So piggybacking off the Indy 500 and especially off of the racecraft discussion, let's talk this past weekend. With any time we post a pretty crazy finish where there's even an inch of contact or someone goes off a little bit, karting just typically gets beat on for bad racecraft. So Alex, you were in two, I guess three crazy finishes in the heats, and then walked away with a bit of a gift and a half in the main. How do you rate the racing in the series this year, last year? What's been different? Has it been the same? Where do you put it at the limit? Was it over the limit? Describe it, I guess.
Yeah, I think this year is a little more tamed at the front. Last year was pretty aggressive overall. I think it also kind of dominoed down the grid a little bit, maybe a little too over aggressive. But I think this year, the front three have been aggressive, but it's definitely not dirty by any means. I think it's great racing. It's definitely wheel to wheel. I think the first heat, we were going 3 wide into turn 7. That never happens, and we had to find. I think me, Peyton, and Adrian have all raced, many years. We had to find some new ways to get around each other. And in turn 7, there was a little bit of contact. I think it was fair. And, we all came out fine. Heat 2, there was, again, a little bit of contact. But, I think in the end, like when me and Peyton came in the scales, we all thought it was good racing. And, I thought it was fine. And then Heat 3, it was clean, good passing. And then the final, got a little lucky there when I passed for the lead, and then there was a little contact behind me. I looked back, there was nobody there, so I kind of got handed that one a little bit.
Braden?
Yeah, and I agree with him. I've been working with Cruise Racing Development down there, and last year, and I work with them in TSRS this year. And last year, I was not impressed with the group of drivers and just the standards of racing and TSRS. I've talked with Alex about it last year, just like everyone just never giving an inch, never like any, foresight to understand that there's a whole race, the best guy will win in the end. Whoever's fastest will win in the end, as long as everyone drives fair, clean, and hard. And this year it's been a lot better. I think Houston wasn't as good as it was, I think, at NTK. I think NTK is a little bit more difficult to race, so it sort of breeds some more aggression. But like I said, I mean, the more difficult it is to pass, the more you'll sort of push the limits and push the envelope, maybe squeezing them down, whatever. And it's not anything dirty, but it's just sort of doing everything you can to compromise their line and make it so that you have as advantageous a position as possible. And this year it's been a lot better. I think kind of trickles down from the front, where if the front 3 guys that are always competing for a win are driving clean, it generally does bleed down to the top 10. And the mid pack to the back of the pack, they do whatever they want. But if the guys that are winning the races are driving clean, then people sort of understand, okay, well, they're winning and they're not driving dirty, so I don't need to drive dirty either. And it makes the whole racing better overall.
I feel like it probably helps you guys, Alex, that this year doesn't have, a plethora of like rookie seniors in the lead pack yet. Like last year, a couple guys moved up. Aiden and Braden moved up. You were on your second year, so you weren't part of that. But junior can be a little bit silly, because there's no veterans to kind of balance it out. And then if you get an influx of rookies, like do you think that's maybe part of it last year too? Could you put your finger on why last year was nastier than this year, and that this year seems to be a little more tame?
Yeah, last year there were definitely a few rookies that were trying to make a name for themselves, and it wasn't good at all. It was way too aggressive, pushing people off the track for no reason. And then that carried on to the national series a little bit, but in the TSRS it was pretty ridiculous, honestly. Every race it was just holding on for yourself and trying to survive in the front. But this year, everyone's a little more tamed, calmed down a little bit. No one, I mean, there's no rookies in the front, so I think it's definitely a little better this year.
What do you guys think is like the reason for that? Is it like because is it just worried of establishing yourself in a way? Because I feel like at a certain point, if you've been around, and you've had some good results in senior, if you have a third place car, you're gonna be fine finishing third, and you're not gonna go wipe out the leaders. Where if you have a third place car and you've never won or you've never been up front, then you're probably gonna wipe them out. Like, is that it? I mean, what's the difference of like the rookie jitters compared to what we see after?
I
That's
mean,
def
You go
sorry,
first,
you can
Alex.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. A little bit of it. I think also like these guys that don't really race in the front and nationally as well, and they're trying to prove themselves when they have a chance at the TSRS, and they go for these audacious moves that they're not going to work. I mean, just sending it, from 4 cart lengths back, or even just making mistakes into people, on the starts especially, running people wide. I think that makes it definitely something. And yeah, when they have the go kart that's third and they don't think they can win, because I know we've always had usually the fastest go kart every weekend, and they try to compete with us. They just make really audacious moves that aren't going to work. So that's a little bit of it, and they're trying to prove themselves that they can run in the front.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I think it all comes down to, I mean, a lot of people like to blame coaches, but I mean, it really is the problem. I mean, and it's not the problem with the good teams. It's the problem with the teams that are, sort of run by people that, all they see is the front guys winning on aggression, so they just scream at their drivers to be more aggressive. But it doesn't come down to that. It comes down to, are you backing out? If somebody is putting a good move on you and they're alongside, you pretty much, unless they aren't alongside of you, in which case then you can try and drive it in harder and hold the outside. But if somebody is up the inside of you, you just have to let them go. I mean, just wait for 2 corners. Like the go-karts draft. I mean, you can always get them back at the end of the straightaway if you're faster than them. But people want to sort of try and race thinking they're either not fast or sort of race in a way that just slows everyone down and hope that they can make it through whatever crash happens, like sort of back everyone up and hope there's a crash. But it just comes down to knowing when to back out. If somebody's up your inside, give them room. If you give them room on your inside, and I mean, at least in my experience, I always try to give people enough room, and I never really have a problem. Like very, very rarely, and it's usually sort of the drivers that don't have good reputations that are always the ones crashing out that you have problems with. But it just comes down to knowing when to back out, knowing when to fold your cards.
Is it like Alex? I mean, can you think back? 'Cause it's most recent for you out of the three of us of your first season going to senior. Is just like rookie, like going against guys you've looked up to, like jitters, probably part of it too.
A little bit. I know my first race was in Homestead I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now, and a little bit of jitters, but honestly, like I if you have the speed of the front runners, you can compete with them, and as long as you just I was running in the front in junior for the most part, and so I knew how to make good passes and when to back out, and I for the most part I didn't have any incidences with the front runners in senior my first few races. As long as you establish yourself as a clean driver, they'll respect you back, and it just comes down to establishing respect with the seniors.
Yeah, and also like I know whenever there's sort of a junior driver that moves up, and there's always sort of like you always find like one junior driver that'll be like really good in junior and he'll move up and he won't be quite as fast in senior, but he'll be pretty close. And then they end up being super aggressive because in junior, they were able to sort of push people around and run with like top 5 pace. And as long as they had top 5 pace and they were ultra aggressive, they could win. And then they get into senior and try to do that. And it just frustrates everyone that's, faster than them because they'll be passed by somebody slower that's trying to be aggressive. And then, all it takes is 1 or 2 moves that are just, not called for and don't make any sense from their perspective. And they put all that pressure on themselves to go up and they really just hurt themselves. Whereas if they would just sit and be more patient, let the race unfold. I mean, you always talk about me, like getting through whatever sort of crash happens. That's just from being patient and looking at what's going on ahead. You can almost always tell when there's going to be a crash, and it's just kind of wait for a second. They'll all move to the outside, and you can go through.
Yeah, I would going back off your other point too about, the bad coaching stuff. You and I both, we were at the beginning of like the almost everybody is on a team era, when we were first getting into senior and running junior. I think in junior was still hybrid for us. Now even at, competitive regionals like Route 66, like TSRS, like SSKC, everybody in the top 10 or 15, whether they really need the services of a team or not, run with one and get coached a certain way. So, is it harder as a driver that's like a veteran when someone's like being out of sorts to try and like correct them by going to talk to them in the scale line? Does that cross either of you guys two minds at all? When you've been in those spots where you take like responsibility as like, oh, like I'm one of the standing guard in the class.
I mean, at least for me, normally the people that are doing stuff like that are not the people that are going to be reasonable in the scale line. Especially if it's repeat offenders, because everyone can make stupid mistakes sometimes or make a move that doesn't make sense. But normally there's not really a big problem unless it's sort of a repeat thing where you get somebody behind, you look back and you're like, well, I know this guy is going to screw me over. And from there, I mean, that's when it gets really frustrating. I mean, I know that if somebody makes a stupid move on me and it's not really like a repeat thing, it's just like, wow, oh well, it is what it is. Go on to the next one. Don't even really think about it really after it happens. But yeah.
Alex? Yeah, kind of the same thing what Braden said. I mean, if it's like once, it happens, but if it is a recurring issue that happens, race by race, then of course, there's going to be some talking with at least and just giving some advice, hey, you could probably get away with that in junior, but in senior, you can't do that with these guys. I mean, it just can't happen.
Did you have any of those talks last year through the season?
Not that I can remember. Maybe like 1 or 2. Like really small stuff. Maybe at Grands last year once, and because there was a rookie that moved up in Grands last year. I had that one talk, and besides that was pretty much it. It was actually pretty decent last year.
Yeah. So it just kind of naturally cleaned up at TSRS then, and we don't have any way to pinpoint what changed besides different guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just everyone kind of calmed down a little bit. They got that extra year in their belt, and I think that pretty much cleaned everything up.
I also think, at least watching from the stands, I think it comes down to the guys that are up front. It seems like the competition level is a little bit higher this year than it was last year. I mean, obviously, Alex, I'm sure if you ask him if he was a better driver this year than he was last year, he'll say yes. And sort of, just talking about my driver that has been doing very well this year is Adrian Cruz. And, we worked on a lot of racecraft stuff last year with him, and he's gotten a lot better at that side of things. And, he's been in the top 2 sort of every race, and, we know we can race against Alex cleanly. So, like we were talking about earlier, it sort of trickles down, but also, they're driving better. So the races are getting spread apart. Whereas, you might have 1 or 2 guys that are driving a 10th or 2 over the field. Now it's not as bunched up. You don't bring as many people into the race. It really comes down to just the people that are fast, and the races always just end up cleaner. when they're a little bit more spread apart. Or like if Alex was a bit closer in that race, I think there would have been pretty much no battling. They would have just been trying to run him down, but it was such a big gap, and came down to Adrian and Phillips caught all the way up as well, and Rudolph was there in the last lap battle, but he just had such a big gap from the get-go that it kind of just turned into a race for a second at that point.
I guess like the question is going back on like the IndyCar stuff, but even then for us while we're in it, we're in a good spot now with you guys over in Texas. It feels like where everyone's pretty happy. Everyone's kind of on the same page of, the level of aggression that they want to play at. So no one's really getting too upset with how you guys are racing each other, and everyone seems pretty good. And I would agree. I think that there was, really entertaining, really, really aggressive, but clean. But more so, how do you kind of maintain that, right? Or is it how it's been the last few years with the sport where all we can do is just suck it up and wait for those guys to get better or quit? Like, I don't know. Is there any other way that besides officials, which even then, so, the paper penalties don't always do a lot, So I don't know. That's all I'm spitballing here. I'm game for any ideas because obviously we figured it out with that series. We've got a good, relatively good rapport with the X30 guys and the shifter guys, on the national stuff. How do you kind of keep it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's literally up to the drivers. It's 100% up to the drivers. You can officiate, and in this era, sort of, we're doing this over officiating where you can't get away with anything if it's, you as drivers, especially at the front, we want to go right to that limit of what are we allowed to do. We're going to use everything, just like in basketball. They're going to be, if you go by the actual standard rule book in basketball, you're not allowed any contact. There's contact on every shot, and they're not calling it, so they sort of walk that line. And it's the same thing in racing. You walk that line, and as long as the drivers don't overstep it on a consistent basis, then everything cleans up. People end up becoming dirty drivers, and it's usually because they feel, and it's not correct when they feel this way, but they feel that they're being unfairly driven by everyone else. They feel like every time they get crashed out, it's somebody else's fault, when in reality, maybe they should have backed out of the move. Maybe they should have given up the position and kept going on their way. And I mean, I think it just it's all in the driver's hands. It's in setting a good example. Obviously, if you're driving somebody and they're driving you dirty, you're gonna up it a little bit and might be a little bit more aggressive towards them or try and move them out of the way. But it's racing.
That's about it. Nothing more to add to that.
I mean, I agree with Braden. I mean, it all comes down to the drivers. That's how the officials can't do anything about it. They're just going to hand out more penalties each time. But at the end of the day, it's the drivers that fix the problems on track, and I think it's just how it's going to be this year. When the rookies are racing us really aggressive, and the national scene, at least. I think the regional scene's cleaned up, of course, but the national scenes, I think in X30 it's okay. And KA, at least at Pro Tour in Orlando, I was watching it on Kart Chaser and it looked very aggressive, to say the least. Lots of people trying to prove themselves, but that can only be cleaned up by the drivers themselves. I mean, the officials, once they go on track, they can't stop them. So they're doing that themselves right now. So.
Speaking of the officials, what do you guys think of the way that they did the track limits with the new curbs that got put in the chicane? Alex?
Yeah, I have some opinions on that. I think it was weird because at the beginning of the weekend they weren't enforcing them, which they said they were going to enforce them, I believe, before qualifying, and then they started enforcing them before Heat 3. We all got told after warm up that they were going to enforce them, but we got told right before a next set of heat races, and it kind of threw everybody off. There were, especially in the junior race when I was watching, I think there was one driver, Justin Music, I think got 8 different penalties for track limits, and I think it equated to like 24 seconds, I think, and it threw everybody off. I think people that were hitting the curbs really hard. I wasn't really one of them. I was staying in the track limits for the most part throughout the weekend, especially the Heat 3 in the final. But at the beginning of the weekend, I was trying to just keep it tamed, especially because those curbs were really high and there's really no point in hitting them. But yeah, it definitely threw people off. I know, and even in the KA senior, there were a lot of penalties as well. And I think if they just enforced it from the beginning of the weekend, there wouldn't really be any issues with that.
Yeah, and you can't even really. It was honestly, I mean, I hate to say this, but it was a joke the way they tried to enforce it. And, telling people at the last day, and I've been in the sport a long time, I've heard the same stuff. They're mad at drivers because they're hitting curbs or whatever, and people are complaining to the series owner, and they want to do something to stop it. But you need to do it in a consistent way. And it's just like it would have been so easy for them to get people to stop hitting the curbs if they put a cone on the inside of each curb and said, if you hit this, you're going to be black flagged. And nobody would have hit the curbs to that extent ever again in that weekend. And instead they tried to do a just basically eyeball, like they're just watching, and if
The
they
race
see
director was
whatever they
watching.
think, and it's not fair, trust me, the way they officiated wasn't fair. They penalized different people differently, and it's you don't make a rule after warm up and say we're just going to watch it and have somebody watching. Like, I watched, the guy was standing there the whole heat. Where was he in the final? He wasn't there in the final. He wasn't even enforcing in the final. And I told my driver, I was like, look, I've been in the sport a long time, and normally that it's just a scare tactic. They throw out a few penalties after people hit curbs, and they hope that nobody else does, but they stop watching. And they threw out a couple of penalties, but they weren't even right in the final. Like, I know one driver got a penalty in the final, and I looked through all the video, and I didn't see that driver do anything wrong on track limits. And at that point, you're just completely manipulating the results.
I mean, you know, I will say, to play devil's advocate on this a little bit, and I know that the comments will rip me up for it, but we've definitely been in this spot before where stuff's changed over the course of a weekend, where you go into a weekend and you think, all right, no one's going to hit that curb, or no one's going to go off track there, or we're not going to do that, and then one guy does it in a practice, and then all of a sudden it's fast. The thing that comes to mind to me the most is Homestead, I think it was 2020, maybe it was 2019, when people were jumping over the curbs in the last turn going backwards and just literally ramping outside curb, then the inside apex, then the outside curb. And in that case, Scusa was like, look, this is how they've practiced. This is how we're gonna run to the end of the weekend, and we'll make an adjustment the next time we come back. And there was still just as much backlash, right? People were mad they didn't do something. So, they were trying to do something. I think, and I mean, Brittany was on here last week, and she was like, well, we're going to watch practice and try to make a judgment off that. But that's tough for you guys, because it's almost like a dance, between the official on one end and the driver on the other, right? And one person's got to lead the way. And neither one right now at a lot of the series, at times, in this case, it felt like it wanted to lead. Like, the official wanted to wait to see what the driver was going to do and then make the decision. And then in other times, like, we've done the same thing and we've just let the driver lead the whole way, like Scusa, or, Orlando was at least good, I think, with the pylons they put out. Like, I don't know what you two guys thought. You both have raced Orlando with those new pylons they started putting up. I think that's the best thing to do, because then there's not a single thing the official has to do at all. Like, even with your cone idea, which probably would have been a really, really good alternative this weekend when you can't install the pylon. But when you put the pylon there, like, you hit that, it comes back up, your go-kart's junked, and the official doesn't have to do like anything. Like, Alex, what do you think of those?
I was thinking that exact same thing. It Once you hit those, I mean, it's gonna be slower and your go-kart's gonna be bent, like, horrendously. So, I think those are the best long-term answers for sure, but the cones definitely would have helped this weekend. I even talked to the race director to try to figure out some ideas, even just put some barriers next
Mhm.
to it to try to scare the drivers, at least, do something, because you can't just enforce penalties halfway through the weekend, and I know people have done that before, but in the driver's point of view, it's not right because we've been doing it over and over again, and it's hard just to change our lines. We've been practicing them for 2 days. So it's a weird situation, but I think there could have been some changes done to help.
Well, I can tell you if you could put a barrier on the inside of both of those curbs, I mean, we saw some, side by side racing in there, but if there's barriers on the inside of those curbs, then nobody's going to be racing in there, or at least somebody is going to have to back out. Maybe if both drivers, end up being idiots, yeah, it could end up in a really bad situation. But I mean, nobody's just going to keep their foot in it if they know they're just going to end up in a barrier. They're going to have to back out, and it would probably be whoever's on the inside there. And I mean, if they would have just put a barrier there from session one, and again, like on top of this, they started doing this on the last day after warm up. If there's any damage to the chassis, because that's why people were complaining, because they were damaging chassis, and I saw a few chassis that cracked over the curbs, and even bent cranks on the engine and bent axles. I saw a lot of stuff bent up this weekend, and doing something before the final is just it's all it was just politics. They wanted to make some people happy that they did something, but it did nothing to help the racing at all. All they should have done was just put a barrier there or a cone there from session one. I actually like the cone idea a little bit more, because then you almost give people an escape road. If you do want people to be able to race in there, you either have to commit right or you have to commit left, and you can completely jump it, but it won't be a big advantage because then you're jumping it so much that you're going to be flying over it. I mean, I think that, in my opinion, just like how in car racing, any chicane is going to have an escape road. If it's towards the end or the beginning of the lap, you want to give somebody an escape road that won't be quicker, and then make it so that nobody can use the curbs unless they basically mob it all the way over.
I think that's a good point about the escape road because barrier would be a problem. Even the pylons would kind of be a problem too. And I guess where I was going was just what you said earlier, Braden. Like, we want to know as drivers the exact dimensions of the sandbox that we go to play in, like going into a weekend. Because if you were hitting those curbs and then all of a sudden you're told the limits, are going to be penalties by Sunday, you've probably made adjustments to your go-kart to hit them, along with made adjustments to your driving to hit them, be fast. So now you got to change your whole line to not do it. And muscle memory, right? Like, you got to be thinking for the first few laps you go through there, I need to brake a little bit earlier and turn the wheel a little bit more. So as much as we want to, like, well, we'll see if something comes up, maybe it's better to be safe than sorry in the future for any of those guys to be like, well, if we were going to make some decision going in and then live with it through the course of the weekend. I mean, politics, I think, is a harsh word. I think pacify is a better word, because it's not like it was political and that one guy complained and one guy didn't, and they went with the one guy that complained. At least to my knowledge, I don't think that was at all what it was. What it was is, if you're saying one guy complained and one guy didn't, it was the kids that were wanting to jump it that were making cardboard signs saying, let us hit the curbs. And the parents saying that actually paid the bills, no, get us off the curbs and do something. But, you just gotta do something, go from session one, just to know we can't go into a weekend. Maybe that's the lesson learned probably for John and for Brittany coming out of the weekend is maybe it's not the best way to say, well, we'll just judge stuff off Friday practice. Like, we got to come with a game plan and have that ride it all the way through, because you probably wouldn't have been scratching your head as much on Friday, Alex, if you would have known that you couldn't hit them.
Yeah, I was definitely struggling because I didn't want to hit them that hard because it hurt, honestly, driving it, hitting it, and it hurt my chassis because my chassis, the one time I did it, it cracked. So I had to fix it before one of the sessions. I had to miss a whole session, and that was just a challenge itself, honestly. And if I would have known that they were gonna, enforce the track limits, I would have just, stayed like that the whole weekend. But I think it's a good learning experience for TSRS for next year, or even if there's a problem at the next few tracks we go to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they got a lot of notes to come away with it, and that happens to be it. But hopefully the same thing. I mean, I can't think of a track coming up to that we're going to go to this year that'll be anything like what we just saw.
I know we have Rimrock Raceway. I think it's the fourth round. I don't even know what that track looks like yet, but I heard it's similar to like NTK. It's a little tighter, so maybe we have an issue there. I hope not, but it's good learning at least for the series.
Yeah, I think those are pretty flat from what I remember. I've seen a couple onboards.
That's good.
They should be good. Yeah, we know Amarillo will be good at least, so
Yeah.
that'll be good. Speed Sports is good.
Mhm.
Anything else on the circuit too? I mean, the national stuff, we're all going to tracks that we all know,
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the national racing. We got one more commercial break, and then we got this weekend, the Stars Championship Series King of the Castle, guys. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for the perfect vacation spot and a family fun weekend where a race breaks out? Look no further than Karting the Coast. Our 10 race schedule is already well underway, with stops at NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, where our podium ceremonies are on the beach. We know how to have a good time and put on a good race, and all that we're missing is you. To find out more, visit kartingthecoast.info. Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com.
So that puts a footnote in the Texas Sprint Racing Series from Denton. The next race coming up, obviously at Amarillo Kart Complex. Happy to announce Amarillo Kart Complex is our newest marketing partner here on KC Happy Hour. They'll be starting with next week's show to kick off the month of June, which will be super cool. That track, I'm sure, is a favorite for many. Alex, that's got to be up there. Where do you rank it in your top 5?
Definitely top 5. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah.
It's super cool what those guys are doing at that racetrack. We're going to have a lot of footage coming from there that week. But even then, for anyone that hasn't checked it out, rental carts, a lot of improvements around the facility, a lot of new facilities at the track too. So we're excited to get back there. That place is going to be cool. But let's talk this week. Alex, I actually talked with Gary, your team owner, a little bit about the first round at Mooresville. You guys are one of the few guys running the Vortex OKN. Thinking back to that race, going into this week, expectations versus reality. What was the experience like, running?
Yeah, it was a great experience from the beginning. New engine, first time on it that weekend. Definitely a little different than the KA, that's for sure. And very similar to the X30, of course. Just no bottom end, really. Lots of mid range, and of course, in the softer tire, made a little difference. But yeah, it was fun, especially at GoPro, very high speed track, and we were on the Vortex at the beginning of the weekend, and I think we just missed on carburation a little bit, and we're gonna work on that for Newcastle this weekend. But we went to the TM a little faster. It was already dialed down, and went on that for the rest of the weekend. Had a decent 4th place, and we're really excited to get back on track. And I like Newcastle as well. I think it'll be a blast, and I'm stoked, honestly.
Yeah, would you say your best layout here at Newcastle is going this direction, going backwards regular national? Because to me, it seems like you're really good going this way.
Yeah, I like both. The USPKS, I was fast last year, the other direction, but I think we've been competitive with both. I love both. I think the backwards will be interesting with the OKN, lots of hairpins as well. We'll make it good passing at least, and those final laps will be pretty interesting in the last tight sector. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Braden, what do you think to expect from that class here at this track?
I think it'll be a little bit interesting. I think I think the difficult thing will be for the OKNs is that bottom end. I think that you get that. I think the OKN is going to be very, very, very sensitive to sort of the length of the track and the length of the straightaway, considering the rev limiter is at 15,000. So it's going to be they're going to be on the limiter a lot, and it's going to be very, very difficult for people to sort of catch up to people, even more so than X30. Because X30, even though you're on the rev limiter a little bit, I mean, it's typically at Newcastle, it's at the very end, but that 1,000 RPM lower versus the OK in Europe that they run, it makes it very, very tough. And it honestly makes the racing quite a lot worse in OKN versus an OK or an X30. But I think backwards lends itself a little bit better to sort of a driver that likes to attack the entries. The entries are wider because when they run it backwards, the exits are wider than the entries, and when they run it backwards, it's the other way around. So it makes it a little bit easier to pass, I think, with sort of like a very aggressive move when they're running backwards, whereas running forwards, you kind of have to set it up a little bit more and draft up. But I think it should be good. I think it's going to be interesting to see because that track is sort of the closest to a legitimate national track when it comes to gear ratios. So I don't know. We'll see. I think this is going to be a good reference to see how it'll race on most tracks.
Yeah, because I mean, the other 3 tracks that it's run at, I guess Phoenix had a long straightaway, so maybe that's not a good comparison. Thinking to our friends over at Coda, like what they've run with it for their 3 races. But Tucson's a mid-range heavy track. Sonoma's a mid-range heavy track, very similar to GoPro, where while it's got a couple hairpins, the hairpins aren't like slow like that. How much you guys have to brake going backwards into the scoreboard hairpin, I guess turn 3 or 4 going this direction in anything is like you have to go so much slower. I mean, it's just, I don't know. What's the reasoning behind, just because it's so much narrower? Is the rubber going the other way a little bit different? Is it I guess we carry probably more speed going into that corner too.
Yeah, you carry more speed because the straightaway is a lot longer going the backwards direction, and also the exit's really tight. It cuts back on you, so you have to open the corner up on the entry, use that outside curb, and kind of hit the apex as late as possible, really, because that exit will catch you off guard so fast, especially in the OK, and I think it will. K wasn't that bad, but in the OK, and you're carrying more speed, I think it'll catch people off guard for sure.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, we're still early in the development. I watched I didn't go to the last round of challenge, but I watched the racing in OKN all through the first 2 rounds of Challenge of the Americas because Chase Jones is racing. And it was very, very tough. It was very, very tough, but I think it's so engine dependent right now because it's so early in the development that really, I mean, whoever has the best engine is probably going to win, to be honest, this weekend. I think that's what we're seeing with the OKN.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the Stars weekend, everyone in the top 4 had rented a TM. Was Brent on TM or was he on Vortex?
I believe he was on Vortex.
Yeah, I think he was on, but he had already had one prep. Well, no, that was what one was it? It was Greg Bell prep one. I don't know the history behind the motor on it.
Yeah.
But switch gears from that. Let's go KA. They've run a little different format than some of the other nationals with the Stars series, right? We run 2 heats, pre-final, final, and that they do an A and a B pre-final so that at least the guys that are coming out of what's essentially an LCQ don't have a tire disadvantage because they run the same amount of laps and then everyone still goes new for the main. So Alex, you got to see that in person at the first race. Braden, you did too. Alex, what do you think of the weekend format with the way these guys do it, and then especially like I like the way that I think they do the LCQ format.
Yeah, I thought it was honestly really cool for everybody to have the same age tires in the KA. I've never seen that before. I thought it was a great idea. Not having like an LCQ, so the top 6, they're gonna make it to the final, but their tires could be like 15 laps older, and by then it's just a big disadvantage. So I thought it was a cool format, and yeah, I was just really happy with the way the format was for the OKN as well. 2 heat races in a pre-final was good. The tires, you could definitely feel them in the pre-final. It was all about, nursing them to the end, making sure you kept them good for the heats as well. But I thought it was a good format for sure.
Yeah, I think those guys have the format dialed. I think they have the best format of anyone. I mean, it's very similar to USPKS. Only difference is the pre-finals, and it's very similar to what they used to do in Rotax, like at the Rotax Grand Nationals, where it was qualifying, a couple of heats, pre-final and final. Which I think it has the best progression. Right, you can have a bad race in the heats, but you can always sort of count on that pre-final to set your grid for the final, and it puts a lot less emphasis on qualifying. So I mean, obviously, like there's goods and bads with it. Maybe if you're somebody who likes qualifying to have more of an advantage, if you're the fastest on one lap, then maybe you wouldn't like it. But I think that they've got it dialed. I would love to see USPKS switch out for 3 heats and go to the same format where they have a pre-final. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, I think at least like to me, the way this format is, obviously it's condensed because we're just running 2 days of racing, but it's taken that European format that typically does have a pre-final or a superheat, and at least if you're in the top half, it's not like all the work you did going into the weekends for naught. You could still miss the main by wrecking in the pre-final. Well, by splitting it, if you wreck in that pre-final, you're still going to the main. Your weekend is still kind of done from winning, but you're at least still going to start in the field. Like you're going to go 30th. Whereas the only guys that are in a do or die spot are the ones in the B pre-final, which is an LCQ. But at least in their case, they're not at a tire disadvantage by running that. So I think it's the best of both worlds. I'd argue, I mean, at the best, at least for doing the LCQ format, I think that, the way the Miami Grands is, where basically the pre-final is a superheat, is pretty cool too, because that's the best like weekend progression if you don't do the LCQ, because the way that one works is it's 3 heats, but the heats are equally weighted to the pre-final. So if you were 4th out of the heats on points, if you were 2nd in the pre-final, you go 3rd. So you're not done if you're bad in one or the other. You can make up for it to a degree in the pre-final, but you won't go fully back. This, you go a little further back. But from the idea of having like an LCQ field, I think it's the best way to do it for sure. And I mean, these guys are, I mean, we just loaded in. They've got 4 scissor lifts ready to go. They got a video system ready to go. They debuted that last month as like an exclusive kind of test trial. That went cool. So what they're doing is cool with it. I know going into Stars at Trackhouse, and I don't know if KA sold out here. I think it's either on the cusp or already did. One thing I was talking with Christian about is, he was kind of scratching his brain of what they could do to entice guys that are good in KA to get out of KA and make room and go to OKN, because there were a good amount of people that probably should have been racing KA that couldn't and tried to find another class to run. And then guys in KA that were at the level, you guys were at an OKN. So from a driver's side, what do you think those guys could do to entice some of those KA superstars to go run OKN with you boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few reasons why they aren't running the OKN is, it's a little more expensive, actually way more expensive than the KA, a little more expensive than the X30, and it's new. So maybe people aren't, maybe they couldn't even get a motor really, because I know we were trying to find a motor last minute and we were lucky. So a lot of it's that, and I think there should be some more entries for Newcastle. I think a lot of the KA guys are trying it for this weekend. But I think the main reason at Trackhouse was people actually just couldn't find engines. Like I talked to a lot of the KA drivers, and they really just couldn't find engines, or they were already just signed up and were already locked in. But I think this weekend, if we get at least 20 entries, I think that'll be good for the class. I think we had like 15 at Trackhouse, so if we get like 20 or even close to 25, I think that'll be brilliant. So I think something like that would be good.
Braden, what do you think they can do to kind of get guys to jump?
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of people are pretty skeptical of it, just like any class that comes in at the beginning. I think a lot of people are waiting because they don't want to get into something and have it not be, essentially be dead in a couple of years. That's why, like, all the series in the past, when they first went to the X30 from the Leopard, and we used to run, tag where we had a bunch of engines. And, when they first introduced the X30, they were like, we're locked in for 7 years. So you can buy this package. It's going to have resale value. We don't know that right now for the OKN. It could be a boat anchor in 5 years for all we know. You never, ever know. And you have the FIA backing it. So you at least have some certainty there. But in the US, I mean, Stars is bringing it over, and they're the first ones. So I think a lot of people are just sort of waiting to see if it's the next big thing or not. But I don't think you're really going to be able to combat that at all unless you really put a big emphasis or incentivize people to go and run it, by either giving cheaper deals on engines or something like that. But still a lot of money. I mean, everyone in karting is sort of, they put a lot of their money towards it, and they don't want to buy a boat anchor and be out $4,000. So
Yeah. I mean, everyone's always on the limit, with whatever budget size they're at. Everyone's pushing it at the limit they can spend, and then going a little bit more to race a little bit more. But I mean, that's not a big problem, but the same issue that I think all the series struggle with to get guys from what's supposed to be a feeder class to go up. I mean, Alex, I mean, you can attest to it. You were kind of on the opposite end of that last year, where you didn't feel like you were going to be able to get a good X30, and so you guys just committed to run KA because you could be competitive there.
That, and it's way cheaper as well to run KA, so I was happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's where, incentive programs are, I don't know. It's tough. I know Christian always comes at me, or any of the series owner, whenever I talk about prize money to get guys to jump over. But I mean, it works to at least the degree that you want. You're not trying to kick everybody out of the class. You're just trying to get the fast guys that go and just get trophies in that class to have a reason to kind of go and want to run something, faster, and get them out and kind of make way, and keep moving the ladder along. I mean, I think it worked really good for you. I don't think there was any other driver that, outside of Jeremy, that had higher stock coming out of last year, Alex, than yourself with the year that you had. So, it works to go down there for a little bit and then, out of respect, kind of staying away if you can. But it's a lot, right? It's a lot of money to go at it, and there's no end game, so it's hard to justify.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess, kind of last thoughts going into the weekend. You go from KA to this. This has probably got to be one heck of a fun summer 2 weeks for you, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't think I'd be doing that much karting anyways this year, so these 2 weeks have been a blast. And yeah, it's just a little different in the KA, but I'm sure by the first session, lap 3, I'll be right on it. So I'm just ready to get out there and put some laps down. So yeah.
And your friends in the comments, they've been roasting you this whole time, Alex. Do you have a cane shift
geez.
you have to get to here in a little bit?
Not this week. Maybe next week. No, not this week. Oh boy, let me read these.
There've been a good few, a good few coming in from all of them. But I mean, a lot of guys echoing and think a lot of what you guys said. And Max Taylor from earlier was talking about how, he said, speaking as a senior rookie, and junior going up, he's like, juniors going up to senior, they think they have something to prove, and they see the other drivers being aggressive, they copy it, but they don't have the finesse to pull it off. They do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, our boy Austin Osborne. See, this goes back on it, right? We're talking about how expensive it is to run, and how there's, hardly an incentive to keep running it. I mean, in your case, you're doing everything you can to diversify your racing to try and find a way to make a living driving, or at least be able to drive, without spending an arm and a leg year to year, and keep it in your life. As much as everybody wants to say, oh, we need an 18 plus class, or we need a whatever class for adults, I don't think it would have the entries, because the guys in that 18 to 30-year-old age range, they don't have the money to spend on karting, or on any sport at this level that we're at. It just but I mean, I agree. I think we're probably lucky that, at least with you guys at TSRS, the rookies being a little bit further back down the grid lets the veterans kind of set the pace in it, for sure.
Yeah.
Brad, final thoughts going into this week for you being on the sidelines once again?
I'm excited. Stars is our sort of biggest series driver count with MPG. I'll be working with MPG this week, and then we have a summer camp coming up the following week. So yeah, I mean, got a bunch of drivers coming. I'm excited. Got some good shoes in the team and lots of good kids that are improving week on week. So I'm excited to just be able to compete with for a win with my drivers and my team and keep on working. So looking forward to Stars as well. They always do a good job running the series. So yeah, I'm excited. Nice to be 2 hours from home as well this week.
Yeah, can't say I'm in the same boat
Yeah,
there. It's
yeah.
been a fun 18. No, I don't know how long it was. It was supposed to be only 14 hours. Felt like a lot more. We're done. You're probably flying up, you spoiled brat, aren't you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm flying up tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yep.
you suck. You suck.
Yep. Easy.
Um,
Sleep all the way.
Terrible. Anyway, as always, everybody, thanks for watching. Next week, we'll be back again. We'll talk a little more to prep for everything coming up. We got this crazy summer stretch that we've got all the way through, really, with one gap week to the Scoozers Summer Nats the end of July. So there's racing almost every single weekend you'll be able to watch. This weekend kicks off Saturday. You'll get to watch Alex, the rest of the OKN Stars field, along with the rest of the Stars Championship Series get underway. And then next week we head to Utah, Scoozer Pro Tour, and the show rolls on. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday. If you don't get to tune in this Saturday, go live, I think, 10 a.m. Eastern. Kick it off.